All right, and I will share my screen. How's that? Is that okay? I mean, I know it's a picture of us, but it looks okay. Okay, right. So, welcome. Thanks a lot to everyone for coming along. My name is Ross McIntyre. I'm here with Ali Dad and Dave. Together, we are Desirable Futures, and we're out to kind of change the world of work. And we're going to talk a little about some of our motivation, and some of the trends in the market and kind of some of the things that we like and that we see good. So, we're talking about the future of work is human, and just click here. There's the agenda. Welcome. We're going to talk about engagement first and Industry 5.0. Then Dave's going to share a story of an example, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is us. I said we're Desirable Futures. We got together because we were all like experienced agile coaches, and we got a bit tired of what agile was becoming or had become really, and that we wanted to reset around what we considered the promise of agile was, and that was empowered teams and people making decisions and delivering better outcomes. And that really kind of drove us. So we did some stuff in open systems theory, and that kind of brought us together. And then we kind of moved on, and now we're working with Hire and Buurtzorg and Semco and lots of cool companies who have a different view of the world. So we're out there. This is the kind of the mission that we're on. And I'm going to go straight into some of that dissatisfaction about the world of work. So maybe this is one for pinging into the chat. Um, I'd like you to take a guess at what percentage of people are actively engaged. So not disengaged or not actively disengaged. What percentage of people do you think are actively engaged at work? Stick it in the chat. 10%, 30%, 50%. Cool. So yeah, we've got a wide vary, 5%, 15, 50. So a lot of this, there's lots of good stuff here that we got from Gallup. Across the world, according to Gallup's 2023 report, 85% of people are not engaged in their work. And so I don't know how you feel. That's quite shocking. So there's people who are actively disengaged. Okay, so they're actually sabotaging their workplace. There's a small percentage of them. And then there's people who are just not engaged, and then people who are kind of actively buying in. And in Australia, people who are actively buying in is only 14%. So engaged, I won't go, we don't have time to go through all of the definition of it, but in this, it's an active participant who values and he is feels connected into their work, and so that they will go further, they will do more, they feel a sense of connection. We won't go through the whole thing because we're pushed for time, but if we can, we'll share some information about that. So it's not a great number, and if you consider how long people spend in their working life at work, to have such a small percentage of people engaged, it's quite shocking. Right, so we'll go on now. This was published recently. This is something I saw Michelle Zanini, co-author of the book Humanocracy, share. And so some of the kind of behaviors that we would consider, and this is probably to do with engagement. So look at the percentage of companies where people organize their own tasks, their own solve their own problems, pick what they do. It's incredibly low. And if we thought about internal motivators, if you thought about, drive, autonomy, mastery, purpose, that kind of stuff, then, autonomy is a big thing for people to feel that they are motivated to do work. Now, Zanini co-wrote the book Humanocracy, which is a book we totally recommend. But it talks about the wasted potential, the human potential that exists in organizations that's kind of crushed down by bureaucracy. And so that's hierarchy, rules, process, squeezing people down, taking their autonomy away from them doing the work that they want to do to add value. We also use the 6 criteria for motivated work groups from OST. It follows this. Now, there are big costs to this kind of stuff. The estimated cost of bureaucracy to lost productivity in the world, according to Zunidi's book, was $7.9 trillion. So it's a global problem, and it's a human problem too. Now, companies who do have great engagement, there are many of them, they have superior results. So not only is there a moral case to say, well, if people are given autonomy and they are masters of the domain, that they can produce greater outcome, or they'll be happy at work, but they produce better outcomes. So from the 22 Gallup report, higher earnings per share, less absenteeism, less turnover. But organizations like this exist. So a lot of tech organizations in Silicon Valley, whilst there's variance in, their adoption of this stuff, organizations that are purpose-led and that empower employees have a superior outcome. There is just no debating it. The data shows it again and again. And so our case is that we are looking to support and advocate for organizational models and ways of organizing that support people to have the autonomy they need to make the decisions to generate value for their customers, and that's value that they can share into. So there's a win-win thing. A great example is we're off to China to visit Hire in Qingdao this week, flying out tomorrow. Hire teams decide what they do, they decide who's in the team, and they decide how much they're remunerated. They have autonomy. Hire has been growing at a fantastic rate. They're dominant in their market. So it's not only a moral case from humans, but there's a great economic case for it. So that's the crisis of engagement. Alidad, do you want to talk us a bit about Industry 5.0 and the kind of trends that we're seeing there?
Yes, thank you so much, Russ, and hello everyone. Thanks for joining at this time. So first of all, can you hear me okay, everyone? Yep, cool, thank you. So yeah, as you can see, we have a crisis of human engagement, and this has been going on for, I think, I'm aware of at least for the last 15 years, but I think the report goes even further. And I think we are not the only one who are obviously recognizing it. And that is why the Industry 5.0 came about. That was one of the main reasons and drivers of Industry 5.0. But before I go into Industry 5.0, I want to talk a little bit and recap of 4.0 because everyone talk about the Industry 4.0, and really it has started from mid 2000, so it's not new. It's started from there. Usually these sort of cycles goes 20-25 years, and it was about integration of digital technology to businesses and to productions, whether it's service or manufacturing. And really, to summarize it, the drivers for it and the technological advancement around that was so the technologies was mostly IoT, Internet of Things, connecting devices so the devices can talk to each other and run some sort of an operation, big data, cloud, as well as cyber physical systems. For example, smart buildings, smart grids, or even smart manufacturing. So all of them were focusing on mostly technological advancement to drive efficiency. What was the driver for this? Why did the Industry 4.0 came about? There was a number of things. One was obviously the technological advancement, with all the advancement in the internet and cloud computing and IoT. There was globalization that has speed up, and companies needed to reduce their costs in order to stay competitive. There was a demand for a speed and responsiveness. I think this is very close to, this was about the time that Agile came about and started to widespread, because it wasn't just because companies wanted to be nicer. They needed to be faster. And things like mass customizations also companies started to notice that customers are needing, mostly around 2010, customers are asking for personalization and customization. So the downside of this was there was over-reliance on technology in order to achieve efficiency, in order to achieve optimization and responsiveness. And there was a lot of also focus on processes. So technology and process was the main thing that they wanted to optimize. But as you can see in the result, despite all of that, the human engagement was still lower. And while we gain a lot of efficiencies in many areas, innovation and creativity was not as good for most of the industry, as well as the human costs, which lead into productivity and other things. So I think this was about the time that Industry 5.0 came about. There are multiple definitions of Industry 5.0, but the lens we tend to use mostly is the European Commission's lens. They also publish a report. Happy to share that later in the chat. And they realized that particularly during and after COVID, with overemphasizing on optimization on technology, number one, humans were kind of putting aside. Number two, we lost a bit of resiliency. Companies lost a lot of resiliency. They had a lot of fragile processes. And then also sustainability suffered. So the lens that Industry 5.0 is talking about is bringing it back to human-centric, putting humans in the center, not replacing human with the technology, but technology assisting humans and doing the repetitive work so humans can tap more into innovative and their creativity. Also, humans are good for judgments when they don't have enough data. We've survived for hundreds of thousands of years. Um, and also resilience and sustainability. I won't go too much into the detail on sustainability and resiliency. Our focus is mostly human-centric approach of Industry 5.0. But what is the intent of this Industry 5.0? The intent is really putting humans back at the control and paying more attention to humans. How do we create workplaces that humans can be the drivers rather than following the technology? Um, Basic example of it is the technology that support humans in their interactions, like AI, or technology helping nurses or engineers rather than being the main thing. It also leads to obviously more resilient organizations. So I like to use an analogy for human centricity because while everyone was focusing on upgrading the technology and processes, humans take a kind of a backseat. And you saw also the outcomes as Ross shared a little bit. Um, I saw an interview from Steve Jobs a few years ago when he was talking about he read an article, a research that they were looking at efficiency of different animals in terms of the when they go a distance, and apparently condor or eagles, mostly similar to eagles, different but similar. Um, they were at the top, but humans were doing really terrible. Like it was they were at the bottom third in terms of the efficiency. But then someone did this interesting thing, gave humans a bicycle. And then suddenly humans were way ahead of everyone else in terms of the efficiency and the power. We see Industry 5.0 is really about that. Steve Jobs used the analogy of technology or computers back in his time are like bicycles of mind. So they enable humans, they augment, they enable human capability. And I think this is the lens that we want to focus on, creating workplaces that humans are at the center. A lot of repetitive tasks are used through use of technology, robotics, AI, all those things. But the creativity and judgment and the things that humans are good at are back to the humans instead of someone being involved in all the bureaucratic stuff. Or even sometimes you realize AI is trying to optimize the bureaucracy. um, we want to make sure that with the new approaches, we don't optimize the existing bureaucracy. We want to simplify the bureaucracy fails before trying to optimize it. There's always be a level of bureaucracy when humans are involved and you go beyond a certain size, but we want to reduce that. So just to summarize it, really Industry 5.0 is about going beyond efficiency and embracing human centricity and resiliency. And the good news is we're not. This is not a new concept. There are pioneering organizations who recognize that. they've been doing this. They've been creating human-centric workplaces for many, many years. And I think Dave is going to talk to one or few of them. So that's for Industry 5.0. I'm handing it over to Dave to talk about some examples and what does it practically mean,
Cool.
having a human-centric organization.
Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Ross. Just jumping to the next slide if we can. So the slide gives away. I'm going to talk about Buurtzorg, right? So we're talking about all these great things around human centricity, Industry 5.0. Like Elliot says, where's the proof? Like, if there are companies out there doing it, what are they doing, and how are they doing it, and how successful are they? As both Ross and Elliot have said, they're actually really very successful, or at least the ones that that we know about. I'll stay on the previous one, it's fine, that doesn't matter now. There are quite a few. Buurtzorg's one of them. Many of you will have heard of Buurtzorg, the Dutch healthcare organisation, formed in 2006 by Jos de Blok, in response to what he saw was happening in the government driven approach to healthcare in the Netherlands. In that period of 95 through to 2006, what the government was doing was it was trying to get more efficient, trying to get to more efficiency by breaking things down into its parts, and to make healthcare more profitable in a way as well. So it wasn't necessarily looking at things purely from the lens of the patient. The results were neither good for the patients or the practitioners. If you've watched the video that I've made, you probably already know this. A single patient would have to deal with 20 to 30 practitioners coming in and outside of their home in a 1 month period. There was a loss of cohesiveness of care as well. So all of these parts were disconnected. So a lot of effort then had to go into coordination and control of the different parts of the home healthcare. And costs were up by 50% in the 10 years that the government was trying to put this in place. Corresponding to that, the level of care or the quality of care for the patients was also dropping away at the same sort of a rate. Next slide, please, Ross. Cheers, mate. Buurtzorg was formed within the principles of best outcomes for patients, improving the independence and quality of care, which is important because they were looking for an environment of independence. It's not making the patient dependent on the service, but actually trying to make them more independent through the use of their informal networks, what was in the home already, the Buurtzorg team supporting them in that community, and the informal networks which already existed as well. So instead of a hierarchical structure, which was there between 95 and 2006, and what you see in most organisation charts, you saw a much flatter approach where teams of 12 were empowered to not just deliver the care, but also to be self-managing themselves as well. And that's a big distinction about how we look at a lot of teams, and that they have all of the skills to do their part of the work, but they don't have all of the skills in essence to be self-managing a lot of the time. But the teams aren't on their own. They're supported by a back office of about 50 people and 27 coaches. So what happened? Market share, 75% of the market in the Netherlands for home healthcare is with Buurtzorg. Okay, so in terms of their success, it's hard to argue against that. 16,000 nurses. So they started with 4 nurses in one team in 2006. They've grown to 16,000 nurses, or over that really, and in more than 950 independent teams as well. That's also in 26 countries now. I think it might be 27. We're talking to Arnold from Buurtzorg Australia. I think he mentioned it's gone to 27 just recently. And because it's a lot of that administration is not needed to go up and down different hierarchies or go back to central control very much. There's a 40% reduction in the overheads in terms of administration as well. Cool. Next slide, please, Ross. The stats then are actually pretty amazing. Basically, it's compared to its competitors, Buurtzorg has 20% better customer satisfaction. So the customers, funny enough, they're humans and they like to actually be in control. And what Buurtzorg is doing is trying to give that control as much as possible back to the patient and its immediate informal networks. So customer satisfaction or client satisfaction is up. The staff are feeling better utilised. In other words, they feel like they don't have to spend a lot of time chasing things. They can do a lot of things themselves and are able to apply their skills very well. So they feel much more happy in that they're applying their skills. Because they've enabled independence and not dependence, okay, it means that they have 40% less weekly hours needed with the client. Now, to some businesses, that sounds like a disaster, but that's actually empowering or freeing the customer to do a lot of the stuff they need to do themselves, and also freeing the clinicians or the team to be able to work on other things which might be more important at the time. There's 50% less total days in care per client. So rather than having a whole lot of time that they have to be in care, we've reduced that by 50%. Because they're looking after it themselves and within their community network supported by Buurtzorg, there's 33% less hospital administrations. Staff, with the results that Alidad and Ross were talking about, it also means that people are happier in their work. So staff absenteeism is way down and the turnover is way down. I was actually surprised that staff turnover was down by that much, or was that high, but we're talking about an industry which is quite often has a very high turnover. Nursing spaces and places of critical care, things like that have very high turnover. But in Buurtzorg, they've turned that around. And like I mentioned before, the central overheads are down massively, by 67%. Okay. So with little divide between strategy and what they call the real life or what's going on with the patient, they truly seem to value, if you like, the humanity over bureaucracy. And they've reduced a lot of that bureaucracy right out of the organisation. So Buurtzorg is one of those examples, and it's not the only one, of Industry 5.0 in an organisation and what it might look like. So it's actually the future of work, or an example of a possible future of work that is already here. We just need to look at some of these examples and maybe learn from them, see who's embracing this change in how we work as well, so that we can actually create a better future.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
In terms of the technology, I should really quickly, they do have technology supporting them. So they do have the Buurtzorg web, which also looks at them trends and things across the entire 16,000 people working there as well. Over to you, Ross.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an important point. I think one of the ideas that we've got around the organisations and the patterns that we see, and I'll just share this as there. So the organisations that we've been speaking to at Desirable Futures, Hire, Semco, or the Semco Style Institute, Buurtzorg, they're just examples. We know there's a lot more out there as well, and we've been reaching out and talking to a lot of these organisations. So they're out there. What we've noticed is that there's some patterns that are repeatable and some things that need to happen. I'll go to the list, but when you have lots of autonomous teams, you need some sort of order that brings people together, some sort of structure. So it isn't laissez-faire. People aren't doing what they want with no kind of boundaries whatsoever. There needs to be some sort of structure. And what we see again and again in organizations is common platforms for information, common measures about how they're doing, and then a reliance on each other to achieve a result. And so information is available, visible, and tracked a lot. Now, surprisingly, a lot of the big organizations I've worked in don't want any tools to track how the work's going, and they don't like to see it. But that's the key to unlocking people and giving them more autonomy. So the patterns that we're seeing, obviously, it's from project to product. That's something that we're seeing across industry everywhere. That's not new news to anyone. Information, I've talked about that, how free information, the free exchange of information and making it available and work visible is important for all of these organizations. I think there's going to be a lot more work coming in that space. This is a great one for team topologies fans, defining team boundaries to understand autonomy. So designing organizations to remove dependency, direct to put a boundary around to help people understand what the limits of their decision making is, and then giving them decision rights within their bounded context is super important. So team topologies is a great tool for that. It frees teams up to make decisions. And in an example like Hire, they have a network. There's a network effect where people are reliant on each other, but we can't cover that today. teams working directly with customers. It's about win-win value creation. It's super duper important. And so anytime you remove from the customer and their genuine need, you've got to worry about it. And finally, they hold the teams accountable. Now, I think this is one thing that Agile kind of misses, and it's because they never actually transferred autonomy to teams, that people aren't held accountable for the outcomes, because normally they don't choose what's in the backlog in the first place. You know, very rarely do we see actual product organizations who are choosing what they work. Most Agile I've seen at scale involves doing whatever's in the backlog, whatever you're told to, and then being held accountable for the efficiency of the machine, regardless of the outcome of what's produced. So that's our patterns that we're seeing at the Meta one. I think, Penny, some of those things might be useful. And if you're on the edge, if you think, oh, right, we've got all the visibility, working in an aligned stream, start thinking about autonomy. You know, like, what's the next step there? How can I get closer to customers? So there, our little guide. We've got 1 minute left. I'll go to the pitch because obviously we're doing this stuff, spreading the word, but we're also running things as well for the community. And this is very community priced, I can tell you that. So we are running a workshop with Buurtzorg, 2 workshops, one in Sydney, one in Melbourne, next month with the CEO of Buurtzorg Australia. If you want to find out how they can get, you know, nearly 1,000 teams to work independently and how they can self-manage, then this is the place to go. I really haven't seen this stuff available anywhere in Australia before, and this is the first time I think we've been able to offer this experience. So if you are interested, click away, speak to us. We can give you maybe a discount code if you're interested. Click on the website, scan the thing. But that's it, you know, 12:45. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? If you'd like to go, feel free to go. If you'd like to have any questions or a chat, we're happy to stay on the line for another 10 minutes or so to answer any queries you've got.